Check it out. This is our new turbo setup, and it's still in progress. John is working on it still, but you can see there that turbo looks a lot smaller, right? Than what it normally would on the car. But what it is now we got two turbos. So this is a compound setup. So it's a Precision 6670 NextGen, and then the 9808, which we've always ran. So we're gonna use the little turbo to feed the big turbo. And then eventually what you'll see here is this compressor outlet pipe, instead of going to the intercooler directly, is gonna actually feed into the compressor of the small turbo, and then the small turbo is gonna feed out into the intercooler. So all the pressure is actually gonna go through the little turbo. So the header is all made in-house here by John. He has killed it on this project. I mean, he's been working on this 2 weeks, and it's turning out amazing. So it's all 321 from Stainless Bros, and then everything on the intercooler side is going to be TiCon stuff from them. So thank you to TiCon and Stainless Bros for providing all the parts here. You can see John is starting to work on the TiCon pie cuts for the wastegate dump. But you can see there's a gate right there, which is the main big turbo gate. But on the header, if we look down in here, you can see there's a gate, and then there's actually another gate as well. So here is the exhaust manifold that John built. And you can see here that the way we have this, it basically allows us to completely take the small turbo out of the equation for the most part. So we have two 60mm gates on each runner that's divided into this divided turbine T4. So what we have is 3 runners coming into one, into each side of the divided housing, and then a 60 gate on each one of those, which you can see the priority of the gates here is really good. So when these open, it should almost divert all the exhaust energy away from this turbine side, which basically you keep these slammed shut. When this turbo comes up to speed, you start opening these up and start diverting the exhaust away from that turbo. And at that point, the engine is already making good power because it has the boost from this turbo. So then it has more energy to start flowing power into or exhaust energy into the bigger turbo. So it almost works like a sequential, but it's at the same time, it is really a compound, because you are taking the larger turbo and using that compression of the air and pushing it through this turbo as well. So it is compounding the boost, but it almost works sequentially at the same time, because you're really taking this turbo, spooling it up, taking it out of the mix, and turning it on to the bigger turbo. So it should work really well. I'm pretty excited. So here's a view from under the car, and this will kind of help you see just how complex the setup is, and how compact that it is, and how great of a job John did of packing all this into basically a very tight location. So this pipe here is the down pipe. This would be typically the exhaust coming out of the turbo, but instead of coming out and going, up out the hood like it normally would, it's coming down here and feeding into the inlet side of the Pro Mod turbo. And then this is, of course, going to be our bullhorn pipe coming up out of the side here. And then the main gate dump off of the big turbo will come out through here as well with exhaust. But the part that gets it all done is actually the main header itself with these gates. So you can see we also use slip connectors. These are slip connectors from Burn Stainless, and then John actually made that slip connector because this is I believe this is 3.5 inch tube, and they didn't have anything in that in 321, so he actually expanded that and made that. So just the details involved are just really cool, and I'm super excited to fire this thing up and hear it with all this in place. One of the things that was really important to me on the setup was to kind of keep it aesthetically looking still like a Supra. So if you look at that, just looking at the engine bay, I wanted it to look like a typical single turbo Supra. But the difference is we had this big turbo right up here up front, and the charge pipe is gonna look a little different, because instead of an intake pipe coming down here to the headlight like it used to, the turbo outlet is actually gonna feed into the compressor. It's gonna look pretty wild, and from everything that Chris has told me with the truck that they built for Duy, this setup should improve like my 60 foots. It should improve the low end all the way up to the top end. It should allow for even more power up top too, because basically you have two turbos that you're able to feed the engine with. So I'm really excited for this new setup. I can't wait to get it out there and get it tested. We're hoping to make Florida 2K with this setup, but we're not exactly sure yet. It's going to be very, very tight. We have to get it dynoed, tested, and then I'm actually changing to a different clutch in the setup now too. I'm going to one of Eric Luzinski's clutches here, just to try to make it more consistent. And I think if we can get it all to come together, man, it should be a great Florida 2K. It's starting to look like something now. So I got the intake manifold on the car today. John is in the process of welding up the titanium pipes. The bullhorn's done. Pretty much the only thing left welding wise is the finish welding on all the titanium pipes, the EGT bungs in the runners, back pressure bung, some other pressure bungs. I think we're going to redo the cold side piping too, just so it all matches. But man, it's starting to look pretty cool, right? And like I said, you know, one of the things I wanted to try to do is keep this aesthetically looking like a Supra single turbo. The only difference is instead of it being a single turbo, it's a big turbo feeding the single turbo setup. So right now, John's welding this pipe, which comes out of the compressor outlet and heads down to the inside of the intercooler. So basically, big turbo makes pressure, feeds it through the small turbo, and everything is made, all the pressure is made through this one compressor housing. We're starting the final assembly of the whole setup now. So O2 sensor is in place. The header has the EGT bungs welded in. John got that done last night. And then he got the back pressure sensor put in there, and I bent up that piece of copper tube. So that's ready to go. And yeah, we're almost there. We're planning on starting it up today. What do you think, John? There it is. The only thing we have to do is redo that pipe. But other than that, man, it looks cool. So I think we're ready to start up. So you might ask, what is the big advantage to doing this compound setup? So there's a couple advantages, and the main advantage, and the reason I did it, is it will help me on keeping power on between shifts. So like with a small displacement motor like this is a 3.2 liter, but if you have a 3 liter, a 2 liter 4-cylinder, whatever, and you're shifting an H-pattern transmission, you're gonna do an ignition cut so that you don't break your transmission on every shift. So you do an ignition cut, pull it into the next gear, and when that happens, you have an RPM drop because of course you're shifting a gear, and then the turbo falls out of power. And on a little motor, it takes a lot longer to bring that power back up. So you have less exhaust energy to bring it back up. So how do you equalize the playing field between a little 3 liter and a 5 liter? You do a compound setup. So it's a small turbo, it comes on faster, it lights the bigger turbo. So you have it's basically like running a smaller turbo, but you also have the bigger end turbo to help on the top end. So this will help keep the car in power better on shifts, and it also has the ability to make more power in on the top end too, because now you have 2 turbos that you can use in a compound setup, so you can push the air from the little turbo and the air from the big turbo through this motor. So this is a way to kind of equalize the playing field between the V8 cars and a little V6 or 6-cylinder car or 4-cylinder car. It's a way to kind of help combat that issue of displacement and not being able to get the turbo spooled up as quick. In this car, I was using nitrous, and I was having engine problems with that from spraying too much nitrous. So this should eliminate the need for nitrous, and it should give me more top end, and it should give me more low end power. So all around, this setup should work really well for me. That looks cool.